Well, hello, everybody. This is Manny Aragon here from the Wolf Workshop Center for Structural Performance, and thank you for joining us again for this new installment of the 2014 Endurance Summit. Today, we've got another extraordinary person. George Vargas has got many accomplishments here. I'm just going to name a couple because there's just so many to list, but two that stood out for me because I don't know. I basically don't know about all of them. There's so many here, and we'll probably talk about these in the interview. But he's a six-time, I think it's 6 consecutive years of the Furnace Creek 508, and we're going to find out more about that because I don't know all the details. But that's a 508, I believe, consecutive hours, like no rest, on the bike for 48 hours or somewhere around there. 35,000 feet of nonstop, climbing, and also he's done some other amazing things here. Like I think it's a 2-man team racing across America. Is that right, George?
Yes. That was 2000. 2007, I believe. Yes.
So before we get much farther into this, tell me a little bit more about the Furnace Creek 508 and really what that race is all about and how you got into it.
Well, first let me thank you for even considering me for your panel of guests, and I really appreciate it. I'm honored and flattered to actually be here. So thank you very much for that. The 508 is an event that's held in October, and it is, as it's appropriately named, the 508. It's a 508-mile nonstop cycling race. We call it an ultra cycling race. We can get into the definitions of ultra later, but it is nonstop in the sense that the clock is ticking from the moment you cross the start line till you cross the finish line. So you can ride straight through. You can take a nap if you need to. You can get off the bike and take care of your natural body functions. You can eat if you need to. But the front runners and people who are really looking to do well will ride straight through the night into the next day. Winners usually are in the 30-hour time frame. Guys like me who have always held a full-time job, children, and coaching as a side business, I'm in the 37 to 42-hour range. So you have 48 hours to complete it, but it's time management, how hard you ride, and how much time you spend off the bike, and and then there's all the X factors. There's the weather. You could have winds, you could have heat, you could have cold, all kinds of things. It's a 500-mile stretch of road and 10 mountain passes through it, 10 mountain sections as they call them. So you could have any kind of calamity befall you. You could have, I had one year where my vehicle had a flat, and the spare tire was also flat. I mean, who checks their spare tire? When's the last time you went into your trunk and checked your spare tire? And most of us rent caravans, Dodge Caravans, or Chrysler, or whatever those minivans are. They're perfect for crewing. And we just didn't check the spare tire. Just don't check it. So yeah, it was flat, and descending town pass, I can usually hit 50 plus miles an hour, and the minivan couldn't do more than maybe 25, 30. So we were limited there. It's a 17-mile descent, so I mean it's a good stretch of road that you could, free fall. That's the way I call it, descending. I love descending on a bike. So yeah, so it is a 500-mile race. It has 35,000 feet of climbing, and any and all things can happen in those 508 miles. You have a great race, or you could have some issues.
Yeah, I'll bet. And I mean, I'm thinking, Ironman triathletes would, shudder at the thought of 508 miles on a bike. I mean, people are thinking, 14 and 15 hours in a race is a long time, but here you're going, 42 hours. I mean, that just seems insane to me. So how do you keep yourself from going crazy on the bike?
There, that question comes up a lot. And the fact is I'm crazy for getting on the bike in the first place that long. But, you refer to triathletes and Ironman triathletes. They're actually, incredible aerobic machines, just because of everything that they do. So, some fare well when they come out to the 508. Some don't, but, majority of them fare well because they're such an aerobically trained machine. But I do know some friends, one gentleman in particular, his totem is Silly Goose, and, he's done about 7 or 8 Ironman distance events, and, he says, yeah, the 508 is way harder.
I'm sure.
And this isn't he does really well at Ironman distance, and, he's a very, very lifelong athlete, and, he says the 508 is really much tougher, but it's a single focus. It's a single, in his case, he's good at cycling. So, you would think, well, I'm here where I want to be. I like the cycling part anyway, but yeah, it's still very difficult for him. But, what keeps me sane during the time I'm on the bike? I think about all kinds of things. Think about I have 2 boys, and I think about them. The funny thing is that I've often, and I've told this to people that I coach, I've said, if you plan on doing a race, tell everyone you're going to do that race. And when you are in the race, I have one of these photographic type memories, and I remember things very, very vividly, visually. So I can remember conversations I've had with someone about the race, and when I describe the race to them, they look at me in awe, or they support me. And so I relive those conversations in my head while I'm on the race course. So without knowing these people have supported me during these events. So that's how I keep myself sane. I mean, I think about a lot of things outside of the race, and then a lot of times I just think about what's going on at that very moment in time. How do I feel? What's my nutrition like? Am I behind on calories? Am I tired? Am I sleepy? Your brain is continuously active during these ultras. Sometimes you do go off into space for a little bit, and then you come back. But just keeping your brain active has kept me. And sometimes your crew has to jump in and tell you a joke or something, because I suffer from falling asleep at these ultras. So they pull up alongside you, tell you a joke or tell you something funny that's happening inside the crew vehicle, and then it revives you and you keep going. So the crew's always behind you, so you're not crazy for being out there in the desert by yourself. You do have a crew behind you, but it is a journey that you take every time. I've done it 7 times. The year I did it on a fixed gear took me 45 hours, so that was a little bit longer. The longer you're on the bike, the more your aches and pains become more prevalent, and it gets harder and harder to finish the longer and longer you're on the bike, of course. So it's still 500 miles, but just that extra time on the bike being on a fixed gear, it really did hurt. So.
Yeah, and then on a fixed gear, wow, that's even crazier or greater accomplishment, I imagine, just all of the mountain passes and climbing and the variation that you're really requiring of your body. It just seems like it's so much more of a load than having a geared bike.
Yeah, the climbing is difficult, of course, because you're stuck on one gear. But believe it or not, the descending is equally as painful, because you can't. You can only go as fast as you can spin your legs, and that's great in the first 100 miles or so, 200 miles, but when you're getting into the 300, 400, 500 miles area and you're going down a mountain, 10, 12-mile descent, and you're no longer willing to spin at 130 cadence. Now everything hurts, or you're just not as fluid anymore. So 90 to 100 cadence going downhill is probably as much as you want to do, and it's a really, really big ask of your body to do that. So my recovery from it was almost a week and a half, when usually I can recover in about 3 to 4 days from a 500 miler.
Wow.
Yeah.
And even that, I bet you've got some things to share about that. But let me contrast that a little bit with Race Across America, because in my mind, the 508 is kind of nonstop. It's a solo thing, but Race Across America is also a nonstop race, and you did this with a two-man team.
Right.
How was that different for you in terms of experience and training and tools you used on the bike and such?
Right. The thing with RAM that's totally different than the 508 is if you want to do well at the 508, you're going nonstop, so you don't sleep that night and you roll on through to the next day, and sometimes you may already be into the night of the second day of racing.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas on RAM, and especially as a two-person, you're on the bike 2 to 3 hours or a time station or less, and then you switch off riders, and you keep switching. If I were to do two-person RAM again, I would do it completely different than how I did it last time. My partner and I would ride a time station each, as opposed to splitting up a time station, maybe a little bit higher intensity in between, so that our efforts were shorter but just more intense. We ended up doing it more as an endurance style. It's funny how as we went across the country, we learned valuable lessons, and we started implementing things as we kept going. We were all green. The crew was all green. No one had ever done this, so we were lucky to finish, I think. But we were the last two-person team to finish. My partner eventually had too many injuries, back and Achilles and a few other things, so he ended up not finishing, not riding through with me, and we finished as a team, but I took on a pretty significant chunk towards the end just to get us to the finish line. But just so many lessons learned. It's a different event altogether. Sleeping is obviously required, otherwise you won't make it across. It took us 9 days to get across, so you wouldn't go without sleeping for 9 days. We had a lot of crew issues as well. Just everyone was either a college student on summer break. Who do you get to
Right.
to 2.5 weeks of their life for you? They're usually people that are either retired or out of work, and so we had a mix, and that was good too. But having some seasoned crew members will probably work a lot better, and then maybe a smaller crew. We had, I think, too many crew members, and it was a great experience. I might do it again. I don't know. I know that my forte is the 200-mile distance. I know I do really well there. The 500s, I consider. To me, the 508 is the best race that exists. I don't hold RAM as such a high esteem as other riders do, because it's so many days, it's so much distance. It just kind of gets watered down for me because it's just such a long race. So that's just me. But I haven't done it solo, so that's a completely different mental and physical task than doing it as a two-person relay or four-person or eight-person relay as exists. it's just a personal thing. Some people think that a marathon is as fast, as hard as they want to go, and they don't consider ultra running as the next step. They don't want to do a 50K because that doesn't mean anything to them. So that's kind of where I'm at as far as where I put my focus and my energies into. I really do love the 500-mile distance, and the 508 is my favorite race. So, anyway.
So what about it makes it your favorite race? Is it the kind of intensity, that it's all kind of compressed into a 2-day format where there's ultra, but there's also kind of a finite endpoint to it, or what do you like about it?
Well, I mean, Chris Kostman puts on a great race. So as far as the way it's run, the way it's organized, the way it's the course officials are out, and then just the environment or the ambiance of the race. I mean, all the other teams are very supportive. It's a shorter race, so it's not stretched out over, let's say, 1,000 miles or 3,000 miles. You're in this 500-mile section, and at least in the early part of the race, maybe the first couple of 100 miles, you see crew members and the support crews along the side of the roads, and they're cheering for you. And there's this. It's just a different type of race. I can't really put my finger on it, but it's just a race that I look forward to every October, and that's it. As I said, it's just something I can't put my finger on, but it's something that I want to do every October. So.
Okay, well, let's move on a little bit. There's this is since this is an endurance summit, there's all kinds of different athletes listening, but there's a fair amount are going to be runners, probably some short course triathletes, long course triathletes, cyclists. Some people starting out, some people more advanced. Maybe you can talk a little bit about, in your mind, what's since you do both short and long distance and ultra events. What's really the difference between them in terms of training, mindset, how you approach a race, maybe even the types of people who you've coached who you notice are attracted to different events? What's different about them?
I think we probably should start with what most people consider an ultra, and that's pretty much, like, by definition, anything over 24 hours. So 200 milers, while people like to call them ultras, depending on the amount of climbing, I mean, most of those you should get done between 12 to 15 hours. Maybe a little bit more if it's an extreme climbing event, a little bit less if it's a flatter double century. So I don't really consider double centuries to be ultras. So you can pretty much prepare for those the way you would prepare maybe for something longer than a century, right? But when it gets into these 300, 400, 500 milers, some of those are unsupported, and you have a crew-supported event. The training changes drastically, but in some ways it remains the same. I mean, volume is always important, but I also think that intensity is equally as important. I think a lot of endurance or even ultra-endurance cyclists don't do enough intensity in their training. And so sometimes I will take an athlete who's been self-coached for a while and reduce the mileage for them and create some more intensity workouts for them, and then the results start to really show. But there is a lot more mental preparation because if you've never ridden over 150 miles, you've never ridden over 200 miles, to jump into a 500-mile event, there's a lot of mental preparation for that. And so your body will do whatever your mind tells it to do. And the thing is, you got to keep your mind in the game. and you can't let your mind create those second those doubts where it starts second guessing itself. Why are you here? Why did you sign up for this? This isn't something you could ever finish. Why did you even consider? And so you and I've gone through it. We've all gone through it. Okay, this is the last one I'm ever going to do. And you go through that process quite often, and it's what you do with that gets you to the line. So I talk to my athletes a lot about the mental preparation. And sure, you can ride your bike and keep riding your bike, or if you're a runner, keep running. If you're a swimmer, keep swimming. But you have to get your mental strength, and you have to get that edge that makes you the person who's going to finish and not end up on the bottom of the list with the DNF.
So what are some of the things sorry about that. What are some of the things that you do then to prepare? I mean, how do you? It's almost like you're preparing for the unknown. If you haven't done it before, how do you prepare for that in terms of mental preparation?
Right. Very good question, because it is the unknown. If I've entered an event, there's a lot of preparation that goes into some things. So I may pre-ride a course. I may do something that is similar to it. I may try to mimic the race conditions and try to get my mind to say, okay, well, this is what it feels like to ride tired. This is what it feels like to ride hungry. This is what it feels like to ride cold. There's times that I hear athletes say, I've never ridden through the night. How's this gonna be different? And I say, okay, well, fine. Work all day, come home, and get on your bike at 6 or 7 o'clock tonight, and then ride until tomorrow morning. And that's what it's going to feel like, because you're mentally, been working all day, using your brain to handle whatever emergencies and fires that come up while you're at work. And now it's time to get on your bike, and you're mentally exhausted, but now let's ride through the night. You don't have to ride for 24 hours. No, just ride 12, but ride from 7 o'clock tonight until tomorrow morning. And then go back to work.
I love it.
And
That's
then
great.
Yeah, right? But see, it's unconventional, right? People wouldn't think to do that because, well, no, I'll wait till the weekend to ride long. We don't have to ride long. Just ride 10 or 12 hours tonight and go back to work tomorrow. And put in 36 hours like that, and you'll see what it feels like to be, your mental acuity starts to dwindle. It really does. When you're tired, you're hungry, and now put your face on, because you're at work again, and people, don't need to know that you rode all night. You need to kind of conceal that, right? So it's difficult to prepare for the unknown. You just continue to do things that you think might come up, anticipate them, and maybe try to mimic those race conditions in your training. I try to work with athletes that, don't actually know what to expect, but I say to them, this is something that could come up. How are you going to deal with that? Okay, go ride. People that hire me on as a coach sometimes wonder what I'm doing, but in the end, there is a method to the madness, and they realize, wow, yeah, thanks. When I was at mile X, I thought about you, and you were like just resonating in my head, all the things you taught me. It gives me chills when I get that. So that's what makes it all worth it too.
For sure, yeah. There's no satisfaction like helping somebody to succeed and seeing that happen. It's quite amazing. I'm not a coach, but I am in kind of a different realm, so I get that, and I've been a teacher in the past and such. So you're taking on coaching clients, and what I'm guessing most of these people who are coming to you for coaching are not inexperienced, but they've been around for a while, or they're super brave, and they go, wow, I want that guy because he does these things that I can't even conceive of doing, but I want to do it. So what are some of the mistakes that people you see, the real common mistakes that you see people making when they're making the jump from, say, casual to ultra endurance or these longer races in terms of training and approach?
It's funny because they could be many, but a lot of them really just narrow down to just a few things in categories, I should say. But the breakdown of them could look like a lot of them, but it really just kind of funnels right back into just a few of the principles. So the staying fueled and hydrated thing, I just don't think people really understand how important fueling is to their success at these events. And especially if you ride out in the desert, you think you're hydrating enough, but the fact is you need a whole lot more, just because the air is so dry that you're using so much more of the moisture or the fluids to keep your lungs and all your breathing passages nice and moist, and so that you just expel a lot more moisture through your breathing. And so dehydration, not enough fuel, these are very, very common mistakes that people make. They'll make them on the training rides. Or just the opposite. They fuel too much. They think, I need to eat. And, that was one of the issues I had on my rookie year in 2006 at the 508 was I just ate too much. I ate too much for breakfast, and now I don't even eat breakfast. I go out on a 200-miler, or even when I do the 508, I don't even eat breakfast. I may have coffee, or I may have a bar or something that but I've been fasting all night, but I know that as soon as I get on the bike, I'm going to start eating. So I don't even bother with breakfast, because then I got to wake up 2 hours earlier to have that food, go through its influence spike, and then get on the bike. So if you're already starting at 6:30, what time are you going to wake up? Especially if you're racing for 400 or 500 miles, right?
Mm-hmm.
2 more hours of sleep might be precious. So I forego breakfast and I just get on the bike and start eating. So common mistakes are those. Even simple things like not understanding gearing, so they don't have the proper equipment on their bikes to go out and do a climbing event. And it's like, why did you grind through that event? Do you realize that there's cassettes you can buy that have bigger climbing gears for you, and to make it a little bit easier when you get to those steep grades to save your legs for the distance of the event. Pacing, pacing is another big one. They go out too hard, or they go out too easy, and then they finish the event thinking, I left so much out that, I have so much left in me, I could have left it out there. So pacing is very, very key. And so, which brings me to another point. I won't train athletes unless they have a power meter. So, that can be a pretty big expense before coming on board. I offer some programs and some packages for that, but there's no real way to know how someone is cycling without a power meter. So I need to, and because you can download the file and email it to me. You could be in Iowa or in Massachusetts, or you could be anywhere, and just email me the file, and I know a lot better about what your performance was than if I was riding next to you. So I don't have to be physically next to a person to train them with power meters. So pacing really comes out when you look at someone's power. You get to see how they rode, if they went too hard at the beginning or too easy, or obviously their heart rate and stuff is something you use in conjunction with their power to see what they're doing. So just so many little things that you can pick up from reading a power file that the athlete doesn't even know that they're doing. The cadence, or their, how over-geared they are trying to climb a hill, and you're looking at this torque value so high and their power is low. You're like, well, if we switched up the gearing, you could climb that a lot faster. So, a power meter is very important. So, nutrition, as we said, pacing, very, very important. And, we talked about it before, the mental aspect of ultras. Sometimes I need to really, put them on the hot seat. Why do you want to do this race? Do you realize how long it is? Do you realize how much climbing there is? And just, okay, moment of truth. Is this what you really want to do? Okay, well, let's do it then.
Yeah, that's actually I think that's overlooked a lot, especially in coaching. Is challenging a person as to their motive and having them really, step into accountability for what they want or not. You say, yeah, I'm up for it, and this is why, and I have a strong reason for doing it, or you know what, I actually don't have a strong reason for it.
Right.
And I imagine you can only fake it so much, right? At some point, if you're faking it, it's going to fall apart.
Well, the thing is, you also, in that initial interview, the intake interview with a client, I mean, there's a lot of okay, what kind of coach do you want me to be? Do you need me to coddle you? Which I don't, but I offer them as an option, thinking that they have the option. Or do you want me to kick your butt? And when you start whining to me that you're in pain, I say, well, this is what it's about. So here's another workout that's going to hurt even more. So it's one of these, like you said, the accountability. What do you want from me? Because I'm going to hold you accountable to this training plan, and you will be successful. But how committed are you towards it? And so yeah, that's probably the other thing too. If you haven't gone through that discussion with yourself as an athlete about what are my motives to do this event and what do I really wish to achieve, then you're not going in mentally prepared, and you're going to have a lot of issues during the event. Your body will do what your mind tells it to do if you just keep your mind in the game and you can finish an ultra. Your body will fall apart. But you will finish an ultra if your mind is still there. So I can't stress it enough. There's plenty of training that goes into it. You've got to keep your mental focus on what you want to achieve, whether it be just finishing or placing or whatever. But at some point, your plan may go out the window, and the only thing that's left to do is finish. And actually, I tell every athlete that I take on, if you're doing an ultra, the primary objective is just finishing.
Mm-hmm.
That's the very first thing you have to get into your head, is just finishing. So, and then after that, everything else can be a bonus.
So okay, that brings to mind actually another question. So it seems to me that in ultra events, certainly there's a lot of logistical planning and training, but that mental preparation and execution is really the key to finishing the event. So how does that work then when you take that into a shorter race? Have you found that that's like a huge benefit to be taking into a shorter race then, because you're so much more mentally strong, and although in a shorter race your intensity is likely to be much higher, how does that play out for you? Because you're doing all different distances.
Right. There are times when that ultra mentality can kind of be counterproductive, because you've learned to pace, you've learned to be conservative, you've learned to last 24 hours, 48 hours, and now you're in a climbing century where you got to go hard, and you have to make that mental shift of, no, this is only a 7-hour climbing event, and I need to ride hard. I can't leave. I can't conserve. I have to ride hard. So sometimes you're fighting that. But the one thing that's always there is that, well, I know I can finish. I've done 200-mile rides with more climbing. I can do this 100-mile ride with this amount of climbing. So you do have to switch it. You really do have to change your mindset. It's not unlike anything, an Ironman triathlete may have to do in the early season events when doing maybe a sprint or an Olympic distance. They have to go much harder than they would at an Ironman distance, or a runner that, runs marathons but, can fit in a 10K this weekend. So that's a much harder effort for them. And so it's the same thing. It's really a relief as well, because you don't have, like you said, the logistics and the crew support and the expense, by the way, of doing an ultra as opposed to just going out for, a climbing century or a double. These things, if you do them quick enough, you don't have to worry about lights and reflective gear and crew support and lodging your crew and feeding them for 2 to 3 days. So I love doing hard climbing centuries or just hard centuries because it's vital. We talked earlier about reducing the volume and increasing the intensity. So doing good hard centuries is very important to someone who wants to do double centuries fast. You don't have to go out and do 150, 160-mile training rides, which I've done, and routinely I used to do. But as you get busier in life and things, you need to scale back on some of the volume and increase some of the intensity, and maybe that gives you more focus, because at least that's how I explain it to athletes. It's like, you've only got to worry about 4 hours at this power setting. Just go out and just do it. Keep your mental focus and come home and be done. Don't go out for 7 or 8 hours and just kind of, continually degrade throughout the day, and you come home and, was that effective? I don't know. But yeah, it's much easier to do shorter events, and your mental focus is way different. And usually on these shorter events too, there's a lot of people, so you're chasing other athletes, you're chasing other cyclists, and that's definitely a different scenario than being on an ultra, where you're almost always alone, and there's no drafting. So you're out there by yourself, and you have to find the motivation to keep going. But here, on a shorter event, there's people you're chasing down, so that's easier.
Sure, yeah, there's some motivation in that, having somebody to pass, or absolutely, I can see that.
Yep.
So let's switch gears a little bit. I noticed you have a nickname, and I'll try and pronounce it correctly. Red-eyed Vireo, is that correct?
Yes.
And
yeah.
Where's that from? I mean, where did that come from?
Chris Kostman at his 508, he doesn't have bib numbers. So, you sign up for a 10K or 5K, and you get this number, and you pin it to your jersey, your jacket, and whatever it is. If you're doing cycling events, you pin it to your jersey, so that the grandstand can see you as you come through the finish line. So you don't have that number, and something that makes it a little bit more personable is that you have a totem, and for lack of a better word, sure, it's a nickname, and usually it's something that's pretty close to either your first or your last name initial, right? So, one of my good friends, his name is, Graham Pollock, and so he goes by Python, right? Another one of my friends, his name is Joe Garza, he goes by Gargoyle. Yeah, it's just something that's, like the G in his name. So for me, V is my last name, Vargas, and I just couldn't find enough animals that had a V or that sounded cool, and Viper was already taken. So I found this bird. It's a small bird, and it's on my company logo for Rev Cycling, and it's just this little bird, and it's called a red-eyed vireo, and there are some species of them that are from South America and of Colombian heritage, so there was some identification there. And the red-eyed vireo, my eyes get really red by day 2 of the 508, so all these little things, the Colombian thing, the red-eyed the red eyes, and the Vario for the V for Vargas. I just thought it was a perfect little name for me. So so in the ultra circles or in the 508 circles, I'm known as the Redneck Vario. And the good thing about the totem is that that's always your name at the race. So for someone like me who's done it 6-7 times, then you have this totem that everyone knows. You're the Redneck Vario, and it's on all four sides of a true vehicle. So as you're going by, people see it, and it's more personal than a bib number. Which you
for sure, yeah.
And
that adds
every race is going to be a different number, right? So this is always your name, and it's cool. I really like that part of the race as well, because there's something that is that transcends each one of the races. That's who you were. I mean, that's who you are, and everyone can get an opportunity to get a totem and keep it. You have to finish it, by the way, to actually call yourself by it, but that's a small little detail.
And so that is funny.
Yep.
So yeah, that it's kind of like a warrior name almost, and because I imagine, especially in small races like 508, that there's quite a bit of bonding that goes on between the athletes and the crew and such. Just having even finished or participated in the race, simply because there's so few people who actually do it.
Right.
But tell me a little more about Rev. Tell me, you piqued my curiosity. Tell me more about Rev. I noticed the bird on your logo, and I was curious about that, and now I know what it is. So,
yep.
So tell us about Rev.
I want to go back to one of the things that you just said. The camaraderie of that 508 race. It is a very small race in terms of, like let's say an Ironman event that may have 2,000 athletes. We may have 200 plus, and then the solo field is usually less than 100 or less than 80. So it's a very small community. They do these, especially the solos, which are the people that I know the most, or know better than the others. I know some of the relay teams, but generally speaking, the solo people, it's more of a club, fraternity. So yes, I mean it's definitely a smaller group of people that we're scattered across the country and the world, and I feel very proud to be part of that fraternity, if you will. So let's get back to Rev. I have been a member of many cycling teams and clubs over the years, and I was kind of always the oddball. I'd ride 2 to 3 hours before a club ride that started at 6:30, and I'd ride 2 to 3 hours after the club ride. I'd show up in my reflective gear or headlight or tail light on my bike, and it's just I was always trying to get more miles than the average club ride was, of 30 to 50 miles. And so over time, it became obvious to me that being in these clubs and doing 200 milers and 500 milers, I just didn't really identify with them and their criterion racing and road racing. So in January, actually it was like November of 2012, I had this idea, okay, I'll just create my own team. And so by January of 2013, I created this team that is just for people that want to do endurance events. So yes, you can do crits and time trials and even centuries and stuff. That's great. But our focus is women's development at the ultra distance level. So I want to get people progressing through a 3-year program where it's, okay, we're going to do centuries this year, and if you haven't done a century, great, I'll take you on. Let's mold you in the direction that you want to go, as long as it aligns with Rev Cycling vision of it. And we go through centuries and doubles and get them to the 508 or another 500 miler. There's a few of them across the country. So, that's the goal of that, of why I created that team, was to get more women into endurance events, longer events, push them beyond their limits. If they thought 100 miles or a century was something that was difficult and they trained all summer for that, well, let's take it up another notch, or let's take it up another notch next year. And let's go towards, there's a few ultra centuries out there, 150 milers, and then there's doubles, and then there's, now Chris Kosman's creating the 308, so it's a middle distance between the 200 and the 500, So there are a lot of events that people just don't even know exist, and that's part of what I do as well, is make people aware and try to get people to go beyond these limits and go into these longer events if they choose to, And the team is also by invitation only, so I will do a pretty extensive interview with them, and where do their goals lie over the next few years, why they think, these are just basic questions, but they need to be asked, why they think they should be on a team or club like Rev Cycling. So there's some exclusivity to it, and sometimes I have to go outside of this Southern California and California boundaries, and I have teammates spread out across the country, because one of the things that I tell people, it's more of about a philosophy of riding and endurance events, more than your speed or your achievements or any of those things. It's not even that important that you come to the team because you're in the top 10 of a century or a double century or something like that. That's not as important to me. So there's a lot of factors that weigh into getting that invite to come join the team. So we could spend another hour talking just about my philosophy about the team, so and why I created it. But that's kind of in a nutshell what message I want to convey to people out there, that this is an endurance-focused team. The only reason this team was created was to get people beyond it. And as far as I know, and as far as that has been written about it, this is the only team of its existence in the country. So possibly the world, but let's just focus on the country for now.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm pretty excited about it. It's something that we're now beginning our second year, and we're growing slowly, because you just can't find at every turn, you're not going to find someone that wants to punish themselves for 500 miles, but but that's part of the exclusivity of it too.
So tell me a little bit about if folks are interested in upping their game a little bit, is there a way they can get involved with Rev? Obviously, joining the team is pretty extensive and exclusive, but for those who are up for that, are there any events that you put on for folks who aren't on the team, prospective folks, or anything upcoming that you want to talk about?
Yes, actually, you have to make sure that people don't feel excluded about being a member of the team. We have, I will put on some donation-only events for people to donations, like no entry fee. I'll put on some of those events, climbing events or rides, if you will, not even call it an event, kind of as a meetup. Let's see. Come on out. Come join us. Come ride with us. Come experience what it's like to be with other people like you that like to do endurance events. I've got a camp coming up in March, which is pretty extreme, but we'll talk about that in a second. But I want to make sure that the listeners understand that it isn't for people who are accomplished now. Doesn't mean we exclude them, but it isn't just for them. It's for people who want to be an endurance athlete. So they may have never even done a century before. I can work with you. You may have never done the 508 before. Okay, great. I can work with you too. It's a philosophy. It's you want to be an endurance athlete. Okay, this is the team that you can be with people just like you, right? But if we talk about events that are coming up on March 17th, here in the Southern California area, there's a great training area by Palomar Mountain, and I'll have a camp based out of Lake Henshaw, and it's a 5-day camp, 400 miles with 50,000 feet. So it's a pretty extensive camp. I will have power tests on Sunday night, Monday, get people using power during the camp. I will have a demo wheel as well that they can use power if they don't actually own a power meter. As I mentioned before, it's very important for people to train with a power meter, so I'll also have packages for the camp for them to purchase a power meter. Because Rev Cycling is also an online retail store focused on the endurance athlete or endurance cyclist primarily. So if someone needs gear, clothing, bikes, our Rev Cycling clothing sells very, very well. It's just very distinctive. And by the way, the pink is because my mother passed away from breast cancer, so you'll see pink accents on the kit, and you'll see pink ribbon, breast cancer ribbon on the shorts and on the jerseys and on our hoodies and track jackets and T-shirts and all that stuff. But so how can people get involved with Rev Cycling? Well, they could be someone who just supports breast cancer and buys some of our clothing accessories, and I donate 5% of the proceeds to the Breast Cancer Research Foundation. As my business grows, I'd like to give 10%, as there are special promos that I may do. I do custom socks and things like that. That's something that's coming up next by the end of this month. So, they can get involved that way through the breast cancer connection. Everyone knows someone who's been affected by it, and or they can come out and actually ride with us, just a pickup type of ride, or they can actually send me an email and begin the process of getting to know more about the team and how they can be an actual member of the team through and even if they just want to come out and stand at one of our checkpoints or something and provide hydration and fuel to the other cyclists, and just kind of get a feel for that environment, to be around those people, that's a great way to just come out and just check us out. It's very, very important to, before you make that commitment, to say, oh, I like these people. I want to be a part of this. So, yeah.
For sure, yeah, it's like a tight community. Now, for those who aren't going to, some people won't listen to this in time to be able to schedule for the March 17th camp.
Oh, yeah.
Is there something else coming up after that folks maybe in April, May, June timeframe?
Yes. Well, I mean, the best way for people to know what's going on is, what do you think? Facebook, right? I mean, it's really the best way that people can really find out more timely information. I've got a few more camps that I'm doing this year, climbing camps in particular. One is going to be June time frame in the Lone Pine area by Mount Whitney area. Then I'll have another one in the Mammoth area as well, and then back to Palomar for the same camp that I'm putting on in March. So there'll be about 3 camps that I've got scheduled. And then there'll be a few one-day rides as well. The best way, honestly, is to get people connected to our Facebook page, which is Rev Endurance Cycling. Once they like that page, then they'll get updates and they'll find out about our events and stuff. So the Facebook page, Rev Endurance Cycling, and the Rev stands for Red-Eyed Vario, which I always thought was kind of fortuitous for me. I created this totem back in 2006, just Red-Eyed Vario, and then here it is. Rev Cycling just sounds great. So, and I love the way most people don't know what it is. They just think it's a cycling term, which is great too. But yeah, like the Facebook page. You can always send me an email, revcycling@gmail, and I can always tell people where we're going to be. We show up at events, already sponsored events, double centuries and things like that, or we show up, we're looking at doing maybe a time station at an ultra somewhere so that people can see us there. I haven't really done expos as of yet, probably working towards that. I just know it's such a niche market that I don't know that I would find too many people at an expo. But, it's not just, I have an ultra runner on my squad as well, so it's not just for cycling. Of course, it's called Red Cycling now, but I'm actually looking at creating a triathlon team as well. So people that want to do long distance, long course, or want to, do Ultraman. There's so many ways you could go with this endurance and ultra endurance. So I've actually been thinking about, changing this, or just under the umbrella of, Rev Endurance Sports, and it's just going to be all of it. So you want to be an ultra runner? Great. You want to be a swimmer? Great. Come on board. You want to be, an Ultraman triathlete? You want to be a paddleboard endurance athlete? Any and all of things that, because that mindset is the same, isn't it? Doesn't matter what sport it is. Yeah. And once again, it's that philosophy that you want to endure an endurance event and complete it. Doesn't matter what it is. And I think I start with my natural market, which is the cycling side, and the connections and the people that I already know over the years. But I want to expand that natural market to all these other sports as well. And it's going to take time, and I don't want to do everything at once, because then I think I'll lose some of the focus and the identity of it. But I want to move and branch out to these other endurance sports. So it's something I'm looking forward to doing.
For sure, and that's a great idea. In fact, now I'll make sure, and we'll make sure and post the links to your Facebook page so people can find you, and also your email. If you're okay with us posting your email, we'll do that as well.
Sure. No, that's a business email. I gave you my personal one, so don't let that one get out. But the business email is definitely revcycling@gmail, and I try to respond to all emails within 24 hours. So if anyone has questions or follow-on comments of things that they heard during our discussion, I'd be glad to expound on those topics if they contact me directly. And always, this is a community where one of the reasons why I created this team, and one of the reasons why I created a blog so many years ago, was I found it was devoid of information, and some training methods, conventional or unconventional, weren't. Maybe more of the conventional stuff was printed, but the unconventional stuff wasn't. So I also have a pretty extensive blog. Funny, I made a post the other day and it said I had over 800 posts. I was like, wow. I didn't realize I had written that much over the years, but I guess I have. And speaking of that, people have asked me in the past to write a book on my adventures, and I've often said, well, who would read it? But people do read my blog.
Plenty of people.
So maybe
there's
an opportunity there. Yeah, and a good friend of mine had said to me, "You've already written the book. It's your blog. You just need to compile it, edit it, and publish it. It's done. I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess you're right.
There you go. There you go.
But yeah, it's I'm really, really excited going into our second year of this of rev cycling. So I am always looking to invite, recruit. There are some people I do actively recruit, and then there's, you know, I also want to invite people to the team. So yeah, I appreciate the time that you've spent with me, and appreciate you having me here. So hopefully the message gets out that, you know, there is an endurance-focused team, club, and maybe they'll seek me out.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for being with us today, George. Just,
of course.
I knew this would be an interesting conversation, and you know, you've done some amazing things, so I knew there would be just really good stuff coming out, and I hope that the listeners out there, you know, got a lot of good information. I certainly have. There's interestingly enough, most of these interviews, I'm picking up little tips here and there, so it's nice. It's really nice, things that I can put directly into my own training. So wonderful. I really appreciate you coming, and we will, again, we'll post your information up, and other than that, folks, appreciate your time coming out today and listening to George Vargas and what he has to say about endurance sports. So this is Manny Aragon signing off for the Rolf Workshop for Structural Performance and the Endurance 2014 Endurance Summit.